Hi everyone! Welcome back to another Planetarium live stream. I'm Jessica. I am the Planetarium director, and with me I have one voice in the sky you probably know by now, and then we also have a special guest. So our voice in the sky is my student Eli, who I'll let him introduce himself.
Hello, I'm Eli. I'm a physics and astronomy student from UMD.
And Eli is going to be our moderator today, watching over the comments. So if you have any questions throughout, put them down in the comments, and Eli will let us know. We'll also take time we'll take time at the end to answer those questions, unless there's anything like really important, Eli, that you think needs to come in right away.
Yeah, of course.
Um, and then tonight we have a very special guest with us, Duluth's own Astro Bob, Bob King. He's going to be doing our show tonight, and so I will let him take it over.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Jessica. Nice to be here tonight. Pleasant evening. I don't think it's going to be clear this evening, but we've had so many nice clear nights. It's been great to get out. I'm an amateur astronomer. I write a blog called Astro Bob. I love astronomy. I love sharing it too. One of the things I want to share with you right off is getting a star map. Some of you may not know, but there is a free monthly star map available online from a place called skymaps.com. Here's the map right here. There you can see the skymaps.com.
And I
And what
do
you get,
have a link to that in the video description, everyone.
yep, so you don't have to write this down, but you just go to the site and they have a new one that comes up every month. You go ahead and just print it. It's a PDF. It comes out one side with a map and also a list of cool events that you can see with your naked eye. And then the flip side has information about the sky and things that you can look at in your telescope. So I encourage you to do this once a month just to have this handy. When you do get it, you'll see that the sky is represented by a circle. That's the whole dome overhead flattened into a circle. The edge of the circle is the horizon, and the center of the circle is the overhead point. So that's how you use it. You see it's the sky in two dimensions. Wonderfully simple, right? Well, this evening we're going to talk about a couple of different topics. The first one actually three different things. We're going to talk about what planets you can see when you go out in the evening sky and also in the morning sky. And then we'll also look at a wonderful little event happening this week, and it happens every month. You might be able to guess what it is. A full moon. We have a full moon on Friday, June 5th. And I want you to get out there if you can, if you have clear skies, just so you can enjoy a moonrise, right? It's such a cool way to relax, enjoy the beauty of nature in the sky, especially gorgeous if you live by a lake. The third thing that we're going to discuss is the Starlink satellites. You may have heard of these. Elon Musk of SpaceX is, with his company, is lofting 60 of these at a launch, and they are going to launch a total of 12,000. You might want to know more about what those 12,000 satellites might look like in your night sky. So without further ado, I'm going to take you over to my other screen here so that I can show you some pictures so that you have an idea of where to look in the sky. Sometimes that's the hardest part, right? Knowing where to look. One of the things that's good to know about the sky is your directions. And a lot of phones, I know that all iPhones have a built-in compass. You just go to your apps and you'll see it there. That'll help you determine your direction. Android phones, the newer ones, also have this, but the older ones, you have to download a free app. And there are a couple of them. Just type in Compass app Android. A compass is handy because we often talk about directions in the sky. I may say, hey, look east, look west, or whatever. And you're like, well, I don't know where east and west are. And you might know them where at your home, but you may not know where east or west are when you go to a friend's house in a different part of town or in a different city. So for now, we're going to talk about the planets, as promised. There is one, and I say just one evening planet visible right now, Mercury. Do you remember Venus? We had Venus in the evening sky for a couple of months. It was just brilliant, wonderful. It now is passing between the Earth and the Sun. Remember, it's closer to the Sun than the Earth is, planet number 2. And because it's between us and the Sun, can't see it anymore. You'd have to stare at the Sun, which I don't want you to do. There is still, though, one evening planet left, and that is little Mercury. Here he is, right down here, very low above the horizon. If you go out an hour after sunset, look to the northwestern sky, you'll see 2 stars in that direction, Pollux and Castor, in the constellation Gemini. Drop down below them, and I encourage you to bring a pair of binoculars to help yourself out here, and you'll see a single star all by itself. That little star is actually the planet Mercury, which is the innermost planet in our solar system. Where are the other planets hiding? Well, we have 3 more bright planets, but they're all visible at dawn. Who likes getting up at dawn? Once in a while, I don't mind. At least at dawn in June, you get to hear all the birds, and there are a lot of frogs out too. So I enjoy that, and the wonderful smells in the air that come with this time of year. But if you go out at dawn, and I'm talking about 4 o'clock in the morning, and if you look to the south, you're going to see Saturn and Jupiter over here. They look like a pair of eyes staring directly at you from low in the southern sky. Those are the 2 bright planets in that direction. The brighter, of course, is Jupiter. Jupiter is the biggest planet and the brightest planet of the morning sky right now. Way off to the left, we're going to take our little spaceship cursor here, and we're going to zoom all the way over to Mars. To the left of Saturn and Jupiter, you'll see the planet Mars. Mars is also kind of a bright planet now, and it's getting closer to the Earth in the coming weeks and months. This fall, it's going to be spectacularly close and very bright, and you won't mistake it for anything else. But you can see it now if you're up at dawn for whatever reason. I want you to try a little experiment when you're out, assuming you've made the effort to look at the planets at dawn. There's more for you out there. Take a pair of binoculars and point them at Jupiter and Saturn, and you'll see here how they form a nice pair of planets, horizontal to the horizon. Look just above and left of Jupiter and Saturn, and you're going to see, and I hope you can see this on my slide, the star Beta in the constellation of Capricornus, and right above it, the star Alpha in Capricornus. We just abbreviated Cap, Alpha Cap and Beta Cap. Look closely and you see that each one of these is a double star. You see the pairs? So we have 3 pairs in the morning. You have Alpha Capricorni, Beta Capricorni, and planet Capricorn. No, 2 planets, Jupiter and Saturn. But you can use them to find things that you may not normally look for. Planets are really helpful that way because they're bright and they can direct you to fainter things. The top one, Alpha, is not a true double star. It's just line of sight. They happen to be lined up. One is much closer to us, only 100 light years, and the other one's like 300. Beta is a real double star where the 2 stars revolve around each other. I hope you get to see that. And I hope you like strawberries. I do. I love wild strawberries. That's the photo there in the lower left corner. They are far better than most store-bought strawberries. You know that if you've ever had wild strawberries. We call the full moon of June the full strawberry moon because this is the time of year that the strawberries are in bloom or they're just starting to ripen. And that happens on Friday, June the 5th. Here's a view of the Earth and the moon revolving around the Earth. And off to the right is the sun. And these are the phases of the moon as we see them that relate to where the moon is in its orbit. So when the moon is almost directly lined up between the Earth, there's the moon, and there's the sun, we see nothing, just a blank area, and it's in the direction of the sun. So you can't see a new moon, right? Unless it's perfectly aligned with the sun, and then we have a total solar eclipse. But as the moon orbits, a little bit of the edge starts to show and picks up that sunlight, and we see a crescent. A quarter of the way around its orbit, it's called the first quarter moon. Aren't astronomers smart? First quarter moon looks like a half moon. And then several days after that, it's an egg-shaped moon called a gibbous. And when it's directly opposite the sun in the sky, it's completely lit up by sunlight, and we call that a full moon. You see how it's opposite? Once again, the sun, the earth in the middle, and over here the moon, directly opposite the sun. So when the sun sets on the right, the full moon rises. And that's what we're going to be seeing on Friday. There's a full moon rise. This was taken down at a local beach called Brighton Beach in Duluth as a time exposure. You could see the moon coming up. Some cars went down there, maybe to look at the moonrise. And during the time exposure, the water was moving, and so it looks soft and blurry. One of the weirdest things about moonrises, if you can see one right down on a lakeshore where there's a nice horizon, a real horizon with nothing in the way, when the moon first comes up, when first it crests the horizon, that is actually an optical illusion. There is no moon there. You are seeing, well, an illusion. Not until the moon gets its full width above the horizon does it actually truly rise into view. You're going, wait a minute, I've seen a lot of moon rises, Bob. The moon rises and it's bright and it's obvious. Well, yes, you have, but the reason you see the moon at the horizon coming up is because of our atmosphere. You see this dude here, he is looking at the moon. Here it's just rising, right? It's actually, most of it is below the horizon. But the air is so thick in the direction of the moon, that's the horizontal, straight across. We're looking through the bottom of the atmosphere where the air is really thick. The air acts like a lens and it refracts or bends the moon. It like bounces it up above the horizon when it's not even risen yet. If you could get rid of the air when you saw the moment of moonrise, the moon would disappear completely from view. Put the air in, acts like a prism, bends it up into view. So this observer, even though the moon is almost below the horizon, actually sees a complete moon, but it's all an illusion. It's because of our atmosphere. The atmosphere also is the reason why the moon has a distorted shape like a squashed melon when it comes up. That's because the bottom of the moon, we're looking through thicker air than through the top of the moon. There's the bottom, there's the top. Believe it or not, the air down here is actually thicker and bends the bottom part of the moon upward more than the air right here, which is a tad thinner. And so the bottom gets scrunched up into the top and the moon looks like an egg. Once the moon rises high enough so that we're looking at it through much thinner air and much less atmosphere, then it looks round. Very little distortion, no distortion. I love moon rises. That you never know what you're going to see when the full moon rises, what color it's going to be exactly, how distorted it's going to look, what might be in front of it. This was May's moonrise, and I was just watching it come up. It was a beautiful egg there, perfectly squashed by atmospheric refraction. And as it rose, it passed through a very narrow bank of clouds, and it formed like this perfectly straight black line, like somebody took a marker and just right across the moon. I didn't know that was going to happen, but it was wonderful to be out to witness it. That's why I encourage you to always go out and look at full moon rises when you can, when you get that opportunity. Sometimes you'll see this too, right when the moon comes up, the air really distorts it. Down here, this is Lake Superior, kind of get a sense of the waves. And wow, there's a lot going on there. Bring a pair of binoculars with you when you watch a moonrise, because these distortions will be even much more evident, much clearer through binoculars sometimes than what you can see with just your unaided eye. The other thing we notice at moonrise is the color of the moon. Wow, it starts out pretty orange or red, and gradually as the moon rises, it turns yellow, and then eventually kind of an off-white gray. It's not as colorful as when it first rises. And the reason for that is because of the atmosphere. Once again, we have an atmosphere. It's like an amazing thing. You can't even see the air, and yet it has all these effects on astronomical objects. When light from the moon, which is really white light, right? White light has got every color in it, just like a rainbow. We learned that long ago. We have all the colors of light coming from the moon blended together so that it looks white to our eyes. When that white light strikes the atmosphere, the molecules of the air scatter away the blues and the purples from the moonlight and from the sunlight, for that matter. And what's left? They scatter part of the green too. What's left are all the warmer colors. Those are the ones that actually make it through down to the ground to your eyes. And so that's why the moon looks wonderfully orange and red, because the rest of the light's been scattered away by the air molecules. How about those giant full moons? Everybody, who doesn't look at the full moon and go, oh my gosh, that thing is huge. Look at the size of that moon. Once again, this is another optical illusion. It's based upon our perception of, we see the moon in a certain context. In this context, we see it with lots of these houses and apartments around it. What's happening here? Why does the moon look big here and much smaller when it's much, much higher in the sky? Well, it's due to something called the Ebbinghaus illusion. This is part of the reason. There's other factors too, but this is one of the ones that play into making the moon appear bigger when it actually isn't. We know the moon's not bigger at the horizon. It doesn't shrink as it goes overhead. My gosh, if that happened, the thing would just shatter like glass. We have this moon illusion. And what it is that when the moon is near the horizon, we often see it. This is the moon near the horizon here. We see it in the context of small earthly things like homes, buildings, shorelines. And in that relation, it appears larger than when it's way up high and surrounded by giant chunks of sky. These are chunks of sky here. Now, if you flip back and forth quick between these two, I'm guessing this moon's going to look bigger to you than the one that's higher up in the sky with the big circles. Maybe not, but it does for me. It keeps working for me. But that's part of the reason why we see the moon larger near the horizon than when it's overhead. We also, oh, this is always fun. Everybody likes to look at the moon and the bright parts of the moon, and there's the dark parts of the moon. And we can put those parts together to make faces and animals or whatever you like. Here's the man on the moon. Here's the woman in the moon. There's a wonderful way of assembling these dark areas to make a rabbit in the moon, and so forth. What you're looking at on the moon, when you see the white areas, you're seeing something called the lunar highlands. That's the ancient moon's crust. That goes back, my gosh, 4.4 billion years ago. That is just total fossil history right there. And it's saturated with impact craters. These dark areas are called the lunar seas, or maria. And those are slightly younger, maybe about 3.5, 3.3 billion years ago. And they were formed by large asteroid impacts that later filled with dark lavas. That's why they look darker in comparison to the highlands. Here's a photograph of the moon labeled so that you can see the lunar highlands, one of the most prominent craters on the moon at full moon. And you can see this in a pair of binoculars is Tycho. It's at the very bottom of the moon and it has these really cool rays that have splat out from during the impact. And Copernicus, Kepler, Aristarchus are other prominent craters. And then the seas. There's the Sea of Serenity, the Sea of Tranquility. And of course, we know the Sea of Tranquility because that's where the first Apollo 11 spacecraft landed on July 20th, 1969. That's where people first set foot on the moon, in the Sea of Tranquility. These areas formed long ago. Like I said, the crust formed early on after the moon cooled, and then it was later bombarded by these asteroids that formed the lunar seas. And since that time, although the moon continually is pelted by tiny meteorites, larger meteorites, it's essentially remained the same for millions of years. You could go back to the days of the dinosaurs and look at the moon. You'd be like, yeah, that looks familiar to me. So change happens on the moon, but it's very, very slow. So it really is a fascinating fossil from the past. It's like an ancient museum that's hanging in the sky every clear night. The moon is, just to give you an idea, when you do look up at it to grasp the size of it, it's hard to know, but it's compared to the United States, it's a little bit smaller than the US. From Eastern California right up here to Maine, so 2,160 miles across. And my gosh, maybe you'd like me, you'd like to walk on the moon someday. This is from Apollo 17, astronaut walking in that bleak-looking landscape, bleak and beautiful-looking landscape. No atmosphere, really, to speak of. These mountains that you see, notice how smooth they are. Those have been worn down by micrometeorites that act as sandpaper and grind down some of the harsh contours of the moon. There are so many meteorites pelting the moon uh, because there's no atmosphere there. Otherwise, they would just burn up in the atmosphere like they do with the Earth, but not on the moon. There's nothing to get in the way, so they hit. Uh, Very cold place too, about 250 below at night and about 230 degrees during the daytime. No water, no air to kind of smooth the temperature curve there. So it's a world of great extremes. And you notice in this picture that there are no stars in the sky. So you're thinking, well, with the black sky, no atmosphere, why? Well, the reason is because when the photographer, the astronaut, took this photo, he was exposing the picture for a bright, sunny day. The moon is lit up just like the Earth by the sun. And when you take a picture on a sunny day on the Earth, you take a very quick photo. To get a picture of stars, you have to do a time exposure. So if the astronaut had done a time exposure here, we would see the stars, but the landscape down here would be all pure white, blown out, pure white, overexposed. Of course, the astronauts were not there to photograph stars in the sky. They were doing research and gathering rocks, so we don't have any time exposures of the starry sky at the moon. Now, another topic I wanted to touch on are the Starlink satellites. Maybe you've heard of these. These are sent up by SpaceX. And SpaceX, of course, had the recent kind of historic first after nine plus years. They worked with NASA to build a new spacecraft called Crew Dragon that finally launched from US soil instead of Russia and brought astronauts to the space station. While SpaceX is also working on a gigantic project to provide global internet access using an enormous fleet of satellites called Starlinks. Here you can see the Starlink satellites. This is called a fairing. This sits on top of a rocket. Here's the rocket over here. Falcon 9 rocket, and there's the fairing. So within that fairing, folded up flat, just like chairs at an event, like folding chairs, are 60 satellites. So each launch that goes up, 60 satellites are released into Earth orbit, and then they have their own little rocket engines, and their mission control directs them to particular orbits. And when they are deployed, they look something like this. You can see a number of satellites here. They're very flat. Once again, there's the folding chair look. These accordion-like things sticking out of them are solar panels. That is to provide electricity for each one of these satellites. As I said, 60 of them go up at the same time. That is a lot of satellites. And as they spread out, as the fairing is open and the satellites spread out, they form an amazing train of lights that you can see here. This is not like taken through some giant telescope. This is what it actually looks like within hours of the launch. Little lights all lined up, different brightnesses. Some of them change brightness as they orbit the Earth. And so they kind of twinkle a little bit. It is an incredible sight. I've seen a couple of times where they've been close together, and my jaw just drops when I see these satellites. It really is an amazing sight. This was from this past March. I photographed this just from my front yard here in Duluth, Minnesota, where you can see some of the 60 Starlink satellites. The exposure was a second or two, and so during that time, they made short trails. But it really was a spectacular view that particular morning. My gosh, you can even see them from the International Space Station. Each one has its own number, Starlink 1203, 1243, 1270, and so on. That gives you a sense of their position in space. Each one of these starts in a low orbit, and then it gradually is lifted to a higher orbit where it's stationed in place, and it orbits at that particular place. How many of these are there? Well, there's 420 of them out there right now because SpaceX has done about 7 launches, I believe, or 6, 7. Anyway, we're under 500 at this moment. That seems like a gigantic number as it is. But the plan is to launch 12,000 of these objects into orbit. And even this year, between now and the end of the year, there will be an additional 1,000 Starlinks launched into orbit. Again, to provide global internet service. By the end of the year, they will be able to provide internet service for the northern United States and parts of Canada. That'll be the start, and then it'll branch out from there until the entire globe is covered and internet access is available in the year 2027. What's the problem? What's the problem with having this? It's a beautiful sight. It's wonderful. It's an amazing thing to see. And yet, some people are concerned, especially astronomers, because the Starlinks are so bright that they pass through the field of view of their telescopes. And they make it very difficult sometimes to take photographs of some of these very faint objects that astronomers are studying intensely, like black holes in the center of galaxies, quasars, exoplanets, and such. Here is a photograph that shows you what the problem is. These fuzzy blobs you see here are galaxies, and in this time exposure made at a professional observatory, the Starlink satellites pass through the field of view. Very difficult to get rid of all of those lines from all of those satellites. Not just astronomers, but ordinary people are concerned about Starlinks because there will be more of them than there are stars in the sky. On any average night, you might see maybe 3,000 to 4,000 stars, but the Starlinks, which are generally visible during twilight and the early part of the evening, could number up to 12,000. So it's almost like an industrialization of the night sky. And some of us are concerned that it will damage the natural character and our natural heritage, human heritage of enjoying the night. And that's why astronomers got together with SpaceX and are trying to take care of the problem. The engineers there are working to orient the satellites so that their antennas don't reflect as much light. And on this very next Starlink mission, by the way, launches tonight, assuming good weather. Tonight is June 3rd. 60 new ones will go up this evening. Among those 60 is one called VisorSat. And what a VisorSat is kind of what it sounds like. Special visors, you can see them here, will flip up once the satellite is in operation, and it will shield the antennas from bright sunlight, preventing that sunlight from reflecting downward to the Earth, where it would cause astronomers, and maybe you, a problem seeing all the time. The idea is to get these things faint enough so that they don't pose a problem for professional astronomers, and so that you and I aren't always looking at satellites every time we look up at the night sky, so we can still just enjoy the raw beauty of it all. Next, I'm going to just give you a very brief survey of how to use a website that will help you find the Starlink satellites. And that website, and I know it's been mentioned on here before in other planetarium programs from the University of Minnesota Duluth, it's called heavensabove.com. That's a hyphen in there, heavens-above.com. And with that, I'm going to take you back, or take me back, so I can say hello again. And then we're going to jump back to a different screen. All right, I hope you can see that. Are we looking good, Jessica? Is that screen showing the
Still
desktop?
loading. There it is. Got it now.
It's there. It took a little bit to load. Okay, we have 400 people working on it, moving dirt just to get that to load right. So here's our screen. I'm going to step one back. Oh, maybe two back. We are now at heavensabove.com. You can see it right up there in the line. And This is what you see when you arrive at this website, and you're like, well, where do I go from here? Well, there are many places. One place you can go is to tap the ISS link. I've hovered my cursor right over it. ISS is the International Space Station. See if there are any passes for your particular city. I won't do it for in the moment, but you can change your location by going to the upper right corner of the screen. I have it set for Duluth, where I live, right? But you can click on it and you can set it for where you live using a map or just typing in the name of the nearest large city. Let's go back to the blue links. And you're going to see this one called Starlink 7 placeholder. That's for the next launch. That's tonight's launch. Heavens Above will hopefully update that later this evening or tomorrow so that when you click on that link, it will show you when and where to look for the latest launch of the Starlink satellites. In the meantime, you can go on the Starlink passes for all objects from the launch. Click on it. It will take you to this page and the most recent launch, which was, no surprise, Starlink 6. If you want to see other launches and whether those satellites are still visible in your sky, you just click on that window and select one of these. But we'll stay with 6, the most recent launch, okay? And here on the left, we've got the date when it's visible. There's the Starlink and the name. It's an ID for that particular Starlink in the group. The magnitude or brightness is listed here. This is an important thing to look at. When you see numbers like 4.9, 5, 3.5, 4, anything 4, 5, or 6 is generally too faint to see with your eye. But if the numbers are 1, 2, and 3, those are bright enough to view with the naked eye, especially the closer to 1 you see, definitely go out and try to get a look at those because they'll be very obvious. 1 is called first magnitude, 2 is second magnitude, and that's how astronomers judge brightness. Smaller the number, the brighter the object. This is the start time. This is when it first appears at a certain point above the horizon where you could easily see it, okay? So 00, notice the time. It's in 24-hour time. It's not PM, AM. So 00 means midnight. 01 means 1 a.m. 06 means 6 a.m. 10 is 10 a.m. 12 is noon. 13 is 1 o'clock. 18 is 6 o'clock. 21 is 9 o'clock, and so on. Tells you the altitude in degrees. Now, degrees are kind of easy. You don't have to know too much about it, but just know this, that if you reach your fist out like this against the sky, horizontally or vertically, this is 10 degrees if you hold your fist at arm's length. So if it says 24 degrees there above the horizon, then you just put your fist vertical and go 10, 20 and a half. And that's how high you look. So keep your fist handy, and that'll be your tool to guide you. Azimuth is just the direction, east, northeast, and so on. Once again, direction, an important thing to know. Use your phone. Highest point, that's the time when it's highest. Usually when it's brightest is when it's highest. That's how high it is. That's the azimuth for direction. And when the whole thing is over for that satellite, when it's too faint or gets too low, that is the end. So you have date, satellite number, brightness, start, highest point, and the end. And that is, in a nutshell, how to use this, except for one last thing. You're like, okay, I know where to look. I know about how bright it's going to be, but I'd like to know a little bit better exactly where to look. Well, we can help you with that. If you click on one of these links, just click anywhere on the bar. And hopefully we won't have to wait too long. There we go. Hey, check it out. You get a map. Remember that map I showed you in the beginning, how it was the 3D sky, the dome flattened into a circle? Well, you get the same thing here. You get a circle that shows the whole sky, the outer edge of the circle. That part is the horizon. The directions are marked around the edge of the horizon, northwest, northeast, southeast, southwest, and so on. Here are some easy, bright constellations, and this is the path of the satellite. That's where you should look, right there in the eastern sky. And there's the time. So the time is marked off along the path. And you can do that for any one of these. I just click anywhere. And there you go. One thing about Starlinks that makes them super easy, you click on the first Starlink in the series, like this giant series, you click on the first one in the series, and you're good because all the other ones will follow right behind it. So you'll know where to look. Once you know where to look for one, you'll see them all. And with that, that's the end of my presentation for right now. And I'm totally open for any questions that you might have. So fire away.
We don't have any questions specifically right now. We have a couple comments. Karen Harris has a few. Global internet, infinite possibilities, but one weaponized. I saw that. I feel like it's worth mentioning that this, at least as far as my understanding goes, if you guys know any better, please correct me. The internet isn't just like you won't just be able to connect to it from your phone. Like it's not just a completely public service. You will have to get some tools to connect for it. Just what global internet means is that if you do have the ability to connect to it, like it's not like having a password, but if you have the facilities to do it, it will reach globally. So it's not like a tool that people can just use and go haywire with. It'll be protected.
Oh yeah, I mean obviously you would, it's a paid for service. Otherwise,
right.
No one would send up billions of dollars of satellites, right, to do it. So you do have to have the right. You have to pay and have a password.
Yeah.
But you can do this in places that never had the internet at any time in the past. And I guess that's the point of it too, is to offer it to places where people are starving for some kind of an internet connection.
Right. The other thing that I have thought about when thinking, what the implications of it are is like people out in the middle of the ocean, like ships and stuff like that. I was thinking like specifically, like I wonder if it'll become a business plan for cruise ships to buy like a certain amount of bandwidth for it and then give that to the patrons on the ship or whatever. But yeah, it's really interesting.
One of my first thoughts with it too was also like rescue missions.
Yeah,
that they're going to be a lot easier to communicate.
Yeah. Good points. All good points. Yeah. And it should be, I do know that each one of those satellites, each Starlink will provide 40,000 people with 4K video band. You can view 4K video for 40,000 people. So I did the math.
Amazing.
It's 12,000 times 40,000, which comes out to like 480 million connections.
Wow.
And the thing is, the fascinating thing about it too is that this is just the first venture like this. There are other companies looking into this too, and certainly other countries who want to have their own service as well. There was one service called OneWeb, and they were going to send up several hundred, maybe 500 or so satellites to form their own, what they call a constellation around the Earth. But because of the COVID-19 virus, the company went under. And so that is off the books right now, but I'm sure there will be more once things change.
Which could unfortunately lead to more problems when observing the sky. It's definitely a double-edged sword there.
Yeah, it is. And we tend to sometimes think just of our country and ruining our sky, but I have friends in different parts of the world, and they also see the Starlink satellites. And some are not happy to see the sort of pollution, at least in their opinion, of the night sky by the satellites. So it goes all around the world. So if Russia decides it wants 50,000 satellites up there, we'll see those too.
And
the other implication I was thinking of is, I got reminded with this launch that got delayed, is like how much more planning is going to have to go into effect. I mean, if we have a really intense amount of satellites up there, they're going to have to, I mean, it's be incredibly unlikely, but they'll have to make sure that it won't collide with anything. So I'm thinking about how much more will go into planning when a launch can be.
Yeah, they are in orbits, a specific area to orbit where they would have very little interaction with other satellites. They're at a rather low altitude, a lot of them.
Oh, okay.
And they also, amongst themselves, they have a mechanism on board to sense one another to avoid collisions among the satellites, at least among the Starlinks.
Mm-hmm.
But when there are 12,000 and they are moving into 3 different orbital shells, yeah,
Right.
that's definitely going to be got to be careful. There's a lot of space up there, but it's not infinite.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Do we have anything come in since then,
Um,
Eli?
no questions. A couple more comments, but no questions. Nope.
All right. Well, we'll give you one last chance as we wrap things up. First off, thank you so much to Bob for joining us tonight.
Thanks for
I've
having me. Appreciate it.
definitely missed hearing you do talks and stuff. I enjoy it every time.
Thanks a lot. You're very
Um,
kind.
yeah, thank you. For those interested, our schedule for the rest of the week. On Saturday, we're going to be doing a show, an adventure through the universe, where it's going to be just that. We're going to go see as much as we can in about a 30-minute time span. So there's going to be a lot of cool stuff. Planets, star clusters, nebulae, galaxies, the universe itself. There's a lot to see, and we're going to do what we can to see as much as possible. And then next week on Wednesday, we're going to have another constellation story time since we have a new month. We have some new constellations up in the sky, so we'll tell you about those and some of the stories behind them. And then next Saturday is the return of Lindsay with her Herstory series. So if you saw one of our earlier live streams, or if you've seen it in the Planetarium, Lindsay has put together this amazing show called The Herstory of Spaceflight, which goes all into the amazing women who helped to launch us off of the Earth and get us out into space. And so she is coming back with a second edition of this. This time it's going to be The Herstory of Astronomy, and it's all of the amazing women who led to significant astronomical discoveries. And so it's a fantastic show. I'm very excited for it and glad to be building more of these types of programs. So yeah, that's what's coming up. I blanked for a second. I think that's everything I had to say. um, Before we sign off, do one last check on comments, Eli?
Nope, nothing more.
No? All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to Bob for being here tonight. And we will see you all again on our next stream. So have a great night, everyone. Bye.